The afternoon I decided to remarry, I received a single message that shattered my world as surely as glass under a careless hand. It was as if peace itself, so carefully cherished and stacked, jar by jar, on my life shelves, had toppled in an instant. With just a few words on my phone screen, my heart felt pinned like a butterfly beneath glass, torn between the dizzying need to look and the fear it would break everything I'd worked so hard to hold together. I am 66 years old this year. 11 years ago, I lost my husband. The ache of his absence never left. But life required me to go on, raising my son Young-soo and my daughter Mi-jung, cooking hot bowls of soup for strangers at my humble snack shop, selling vegetables at the market, always securing every last piece of our little family. My children grew up, found partners, even gave me beautiful grandchildren. Still, once the house was empty again, I patched the hours together with long walks in the park, singing with friends at the senior center, and sometimes reopening my old eatery just for company or to catch the flavor of happier days. It was during one of those senior center exercise classes that I met Han-soo. He spoke little, his laughter quiet but sincere, the warmth of it worn in the polite way old men save for special company. On lonely afternoons, he and I began joining hands on slow walks, comfortable in our silences. Somewhere between idle conversation and the hush that followed, it dawned on me. Perhaps we could fill the empty chairs in each other's lives. As winter thawed into spring, I summoned up the courage to share this hope with my children. I wanted them to know I'd decided to spend my remaining years with Han-soo, calling each other's names out loud. I had waited many years. I wished to button at least the last clasp on my life with my own hands. But courage, I soon learnt, can look like a grenade to your family. My son, Young-soo, stricken by several recent losses in his used car business, kept sending me account numbers for his children's tuition, for diapers, for some new urgent need. I always helped. Sending money to my grandchildren felt like a quiet, stubborn act of love, almost like my purpose as an aging mother. Mi-jung, my daughter, was half worried and half suspicious of my decision. I understood their feelings, yet I wanted this new chapter for myself. So I told them carefully about Han-soo, proposing a meeting, some kind of family gathering perhaps, to settle everyone's doubts and, in my hope, to leave our story written in a language of agreement, not conflict. That's when the message arrived. I remember that day so vividly. Han-soo and I had just finished lunch, debating whether to stop by the county office for our marriage registration. My phone hummed, a message from an unfamiliar number. The words were short, sharp, and cold. An accusation that Han-soo had a hidden child paired with a veiled threat for money if I wanted to keep things quiet. An account number, like a snake in the grass, followed for payment. My hands were suddenly frozen, my thoughts unraveling faster than I could gather them. What if it was true? What place did I now hold? But if it was a lie, who would do such a thing? And why target me? I was gripped with a terror that made breathing itself feel dangerous. I walked home in silence, the air heavy with doubt. Should I keep this to myself? Hope it would die quietly in the dark? But soon, another message arrived. This one, with a fuzzy, half-obscured photograph and an awkward family certificate. It all looked like a clumsy patchwork, obviously forged if you looked closely. But that's the thing about doubt. The more ragged the lie, the more it scratches at the heart. Before I could even tell them myself, rumors of the message somehow reached my children. Someone had sent the same accusation to my daughter as well. Mi-jung's voice, trembling on the phone, implored me not to be fooled. There was a sharp hint that I was being reckless, risking our family's stability for selfish reasons. Young-soo, when he called, drew a cold calculation. If I remarried, his household would suffer. The children would go without. Everything would unravel. If my happiness sat atop someone else's misfortune, I could not bear it. I tried to steady myself. Facts first, pain later. Hanzo had always been a gentleman, so careful not to step on the shadow of my late husband in his approach. When I showed him the messages, his face paled, hands trembling just slightly. His shock mirrored the way I desperately wanted to believe him. But faith walks hand in hand with evidence. I delayed our registration and instead invited my children for a family meal, all of us together, eyes across soup bowls, because sometimes the only weapon against suspicion is to look each other honestly in the eye. What I had hoped would be a peacemaking dinner sat heavy and cold. The fish cooled untouched, side dishes wilted. Mi-jung's eyes were rimmed red. Young-soo barely lifted his head. In the midst of it, a restaurant worker handed me an envelope left by a stranger. Inside was a clearer photograph and a slip of paper with a child's name printed on it. I burned with a sense that we were being watched. Someone close, waiting for the perfect moment to wound us. Young-soo's face drained of color. Mi-jung drank only water. Our attempt at reconciliation did not cross any bridges. Afterward, my shadow was the only thing left stretching across the restaurant floor. That night, I could not sleep. I spread the photos and forged documents all out, searching with my tired eyes for any sign of truth. I spotted the irregular spaces in names, the outdated seals, the odd font on a store sign in a photo's background, details that betrayed their age and inauthenticity. But still the doubt would not let me rest. Was I, in my loneliness and old age, becoming an easy target? Or had hope so blinded me that I left the door wide open? It was then that anger slowly brought clarity. I decided to follow the clues, the account number from the message. That was my first step. I sent a tiny sum, just enough to trigger the name on the account. On my screen, only 4 letters appeared. Kim Young. It could be any common name, but the syllables matched too closely to my own son. In a daze, I sent the sum again. Each time, the arrangement of letters seemed to change, but at the heart of it, my suspicions congealed. The name matched the child I had raised and called Young-soo for decades. Next, I went to the post office. I asked about the stamp on the envelope, pretending careless curiosity. It traced back to the unmanned post box in front of my son's apartment complex. The lettering on the envelope, hurried strokes, rushed, slanted at the end, looked just like his childhood handwriting. Puzzle pieces abandoned in my mind began to click into place. The hasty requests for money, the sudden surges in desperation after I announced my remarriage, the flood of photos and documents. It had all traced back to the hands that once clung to my apron as a child. That evening, heart in my throat, I went to Young-soo's house. I waited until the children had gone to sleep. I set the envelopes and my phone on the table, letting the silence speak where I no longer could. In that unspoken moment, I could see my son's dignity and fear crumbling like loose earth. He held my hand, so small now, so cold. and I felt both the warmth of the little boy he once was and the raw shame of a man overwhelmed. As the realization settled, I understood. He had been trapped between the duty of a father and the terror of failing, and somewhere along the road, he'd lost his compass. Inside my heart, anger dissolved into something sturdier, a cautious boundary. I abandoned plans to postpone my marriage any longer. The longer I hesitated, the more uncertainty would fester and poison all of us. The next day, Hansu and I met quietly over chicken in the bustling market. As we shared the meal, I felt as if I was finally wiping my life clean, ready to begin again. Soon after, I gathered the children for a second meal together. This time, I kept it simple. I had learned that stretching blame only brought more sorrow. On the table, kimchi stew, japchae, and a few simple pancakes. The children's movements had lost their heaviness. I, too, straightened out my own feelings as carefully as I arranged the plates. I resolved to care for my children and grandchildren with love, but this would no longer mean allowing my affection to be taken hostage. I would help with what they needed, but not under threats or emotional blackmail. Hansu and I would stand together for however many days we had left, and my children's acceptance would not be permission, but respect. After the meal, Youngsu sent me a brief apology, a string of awkward, remorseful symbols that barely concealed a lifetime of anxiety. I read it and set down my phone, remembering the softness of his infant skin as I once changed his diapers. People grow, people regress. Standing upright takes many attempts and many falls. The rumors evaporated, eventually dismissed as the inventions of gossip and personal interest. I never asked where it all began. Some questions, if voiced, only deepen old wounds. What mattered was that Hansu and I, quietly, officially registered our marriage, 2 signatures side by side, filling spaces that had long years been empty. It was a simple act, yet deeply warming. On the walk home, the wind tossed a handful of pink petals into my palm. Rather than cling to them, I let them scatter, hoping our days would settle softly at each other's feet. Time has been patient. Slowly, Youngsu began to meet my gaze again. The laughter of my grandchildren filled my living room. I tried to reach out first, calling to ask after their schedules, sending help when I could, never again making tomorrow's peace the hostage of today's anxiety. Mi-jung regards Hansu a bit warily still, but she sometimes joins us shopping, pushing a cart together in quiet understanding. Our table is gradually set, with things warmer than suspicion, posture softening into respect, into a gentle camaraderie. That infamous message still sits somewhere in my phone. I keep it, not as a wound, but as a record of human frailty and resilience. The years have taught me how tangled love, money and loneliness can become, especially as we grow older. Some people see these as opportunities. Others recognize in them the chance to grow. I learned, later than I hoped, but not too late, that real maturity comes from knowing how to say no, without regret in love, without humiliation in front of your children, and without lying to yourself. These days, I prepare our meals quietly, the steam from a pot filling my home with a comfort that feels earned, not borrowed. Hansu lays out the tablecloth, just so, and I place the spoons. To hold on to such ordinary happiness, I had to underline a few hard sentences in my life story, lines written by others' fears, which I refused to let define my future. In the end, my children did bless my marriage, granting not permission, but respect. These days, I open and close the doors of this house slowly but with certainty. I'm no longer afraid of strange visitors or surprise messages. Before I answer any call, I know how to open or close the doors inside myself first. Perhaps in the end, that's what we all spend a lifetime learning. How to shut the doors of distrust, unlock those of respect, and finally, step softly over the threshold of real love. Everyone is shaken at one time or another. What matters most is whether we have hands to hold. And the courage to accept those hands, even when fear would have us let go. Whenever I recall those messages and envelopes, I promise myself, never let fear make your choices, never use love as a weapon, and always remember, true maturity is born at the edges of caution. So let me ask you, when love, family, and money become tangled, which doors will you choose to open or close first?